Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. This episode is part of a series all about financial basics. We're going back to basics when it comes to money, finances, cash flow, investing, all of these things that make up our financial lives. We're going to unpack them one by one and give you just a really basic idea. Things that you should know, terms that you should understand, place that you can start in terms of understanding, creating margin in your life when it comes to money. Sarah, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so glad to be back.
So today we're talking about investing and specifically what to invest in. We're going to unpack some things about index funds particularly. So tell us, what are index funds, and is this something that we should consider investing in?
Yes. I guess we should start off by saying this is not particularly investment advice specifically for you. These are just general knowledge, education, information. We're not giving specific investing advice.
Yeah, the only letters we have after our names are PAC, not any certified financial planner letters. And this is just general advice, and you should think about what applies to your life before you apply it.
Exactly. But index funds are usually a good way to go. So an index fund follows some kind of index. So you might have heard of a total stock market index fund. And that just is a fund that trends. What is the total stock market doing? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it flat? It follows that. You might have heard of the S&P 500 index fund. So that follows the 500 biggest companies in the US. And it, just trends along exactly what is that doing. So there's stock market index funds. There's bond market index funds. You can do the total bond market. You can do an international index fund, which it's just following whatever the general index is. What is that whole thing doing? And you can just invest straight into that.
So these things, this seems like a very simple way to explain it. These things follow the market, or at least the portion of the market that they represent, because that's what they are indexing, right? This group of funds, this type of company, this place in the globe or in the US, so that they will track exactly the way that that market changes or grows or falls over time.
Mm-hmm. It follows exactly whatever that trend is doing with whatever index it's tracking. So it can be an easy way, a simple way to invest, because you don't have to pick the hot stock. Am I going to invest in Apple? Am I going to invest in Google, Tesla, where you're picking the actual thing you want to invest in? You can just say, hey, you know what? I just want to invest in the 500 biggest companies. I just want to invest in the total stock market, the total bond market. Instead of you choosing which exact stocks to pick, you can pick all of them in whatever index, whatever bucket you want to put these in.
And in that way, it is more risk diverse, not necessarily because it's different types of companies, but rather that it's not handpicking single stocks and saying, I'm betting on this company, but rather I'm betting on sort of capitalism and companies in general, or this, size company or type of company, which, like, if one of them has something terrible that happens, it's not necessarily like they're all going to tank because something happened at one specific company, but rather a more generalized group of stocks that you're invested in.
Yep. Index funds can sometimes be described as a self-cleansing. So just what you're saying of, if a company starts tanking and it's no longer in the top 500, it gets out of the S&P 500 and it goes down, to something else. Or if the company folds and it's gone completely, it's completely, because you've sold it. That's no longer included in the index at all. It's no longer included in your stocks at all. It's gone. Or if, hey, this new company is up and coming and rising, hey, that automatically gets included in what you're invested in. You haven't picked it yourself, which is one of the good things about following an index fund is if you were to pick individual stocks, you have to be right twice when you're buying and selling stocks because you want to buy low, sell high. So you have to be right the first time when you're buying of saying, hey, this stock, Tracy stock, is this new hot company and it only costs 50 cents right now. And I'm buying it because I know it's
starting now.
it's going to be a good one. So you buy it low and then it just rises. Tracy stock is going crazy and it's at the peak and here's where you have to be right twice of saying this is the peak. It's not going to get any higher. I'm going to sell it now for $5 jillion. And then after you sell, oh, yep, now no one likes Tracy stock anymore and it goes down, down, down. And then the whole company crumbles. But you had to be right twice. You had to be right at the beginning of knowing, hey, I'm going to buy now because number one, I trust the stock to rise. And number two, I know this is going to be a low price. But then you have to be right the second time of saying, hey, I don't think it's going to go any higher. I want to sell it now and make the most money I can. So you have to have it right twice. And to be right twice is very difficult to almost impossible. That's what, you can pay a financial advisor or a finance manager to invest in these funds for you. And their job would be to pick the right companies and know, hey, I want to sell this stock now because for whatever reason, whatever projections I anticipate, it's going to go down in price. So I'm going to sell it now, make the money that I can, and buy this other stock that I think is going to start rising. So it's very difficult for these so-called experts to do, almost impossible for regular lay people like us to do. So an index fund automatically does it for you, really. As something goes higher or lower, you're automatically invested in that and you're not making those choices. You're just following whatever the index is doing and it's automatically doing these choices for you.
I was so excited to hear that AAPA had upgraded their signature job board, PA Job Source, into an interactive map-based system that allows you to literally zoom into your targeted geographic region and communicate directly with PA employers. The PA Job Source map connects you to the entire landscape of PA jobs. They've got 50,000 PA employers and counting. You can follow a geographic market or employer site and receive alerts when new jobs are posted. You can even send a DM to that employer you've had your eye on for months. But here's the best news. PA Job Source is still completely free to AAPA members. Log in today to map out your future at aapa.org/PA Job Source. So I think of index funds as almost a passive way to be actively investing. So it's something that is going to mimic the market, is going to be something that you don't have to spend a lot of time and effort sort of reallocating and thinking about over time, or do we want to stay in? Do we want to go out? That it's something that goes historically up over time, and that has relatively low expense ratios. So I think that that's something that we haven't really talked about yet. So let's talk about expense ratios and what that looks like when you're investing on your own versus when you have someone giving you specific financial advice, when you have a certified financial planner or someone who's doing some of those allocations for you.
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things to look at when you pick a stock or in some kind of investment is what's the expense ratio? How much are you paying for it? So not only are you paying $100, $1,000 to buy the actual stock, but you're also paying an expense ratio on top of it. That's how, brokerage firms and financial advisors make money is you have to pay an expense ratio, a fee for it. So in general, if you can find an expense ratio, and most index funds have very low expense ratios, so that's another benefit to owning them. They're cheap to own. So most index funds, and in general, a really great expense ratio is less than 0.2%. If you can find less than 0.5%, that's really good. So if you could aim for 0.5% or less, that's good. If you can get 0.2 or 0.1%, that's excellent. If you're getting up to 1% fees or higher, that's getting pretty expensive. And maybe you could find something that could be cheaper. And then on top of that, the actual expense ratio of the fund is, are you paying any general fees on top of that? So if you have a certified financial planner, financial advisor, someone who's helping you to make these investments for you, you're probably paying them a fee on top of that. And so that's when we talk about looking for like a fee only advisor, or someone who just calls, it's a flat rate that you pay per hour, per year, or whatever it is, of here's the fee that I'm paying on top of that. And you can look at some funds too. Some funds will have something that's called a front end load or a back end load. So like a front end load, when you first buy the fund, okay, yes, you have an expense ratio of 0.5%, but also we're going to charge you an extra $100 just to buy it initially. Going forward, you don't have to pay any extra, just the expense ratio. But initially, we're going to give a little, you have to pay that load to buy it initially. So you might see those as well. So those are things to look for when you're looking at the stock.
And these are different depending on what company you have your investment account through. So different, like Vanguard will have different index funds that are available than Fidelity. Some of them may have the same ones, but some may have ones that are sort of brand specific or specific to those companies that are housing your investment. So to someone listening who's like, how do I know if I am invested in an index fund, or how do I find them? Do they just Google like good index funds? Like where can they go to actually find the ones that are available to them through their current investment companies?
So look up. So if we're talking about a 401k or 403b, like go onto your 401k.com, whoever you're with, and it'll give you a list. You can look up like, what are my options? My husband and I actually just did that the other day. We were looking through all of his options and trying to simplify things out. There was a couple of things that were just overlapping, and it just literally had a whole list of them. And a lot of times it'll just be the letters. It'll be 5 letters. So like VTSAX is the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. So literally, if it doesn't say it, sometimes you can see it when you're on your 401k website, when you're on your IRA website. Here's a list of the options. It could say VTSAX, Vanguard Total Stock Market. Might just have the letters. Literally, you can just Google the letters and it'll tell you what it is and fees related to it. And something important that you brought up is look at where you're invested. So let's say you've heard of VTSAX and you've heard it's just amazing. And so you want to be invested in Total Stock Market Index Fund. Great choice. But you have your IRA inside Fidelity. Well, Fidelity has its own Total Stock Market Index Fund. You can choose that. They're both following the same Total Stock Market Index. They're both following the US stock market. Sometimes you can see like, hey, I'm invested. I have a Fidelity IRA or 401k, but inside Fidelity, excuse me, they might have an option for VTSAX. And like, okay, well, that's what I want. I want to choose VTSX. But look at these expense ratios. Look at any fees. VTSX inside a Fidelity account is probably higher priced than the Fidelity index fund. You're going to pay more for it. If you opened up a Vanguard account and bought VTSX, that's the cheapest way to do it. That's why it's important to look at these expense ratios and go with where you are invested. Look at what their options are and compare them. You might have a choice of 2 different total stock market index funds. Really just go for which one is cheaper and has the less fees.
Honestly, they're going to be similar if they're total stock market, right? If they're following the same sort of group of companies, even if they're slightly different, they're going to have similar growth profiles. So finding the one is the cheapest. I think of that as like the cheapest, the ones with the lowest expense ratio. That means that the smallest possible amount of your money is going to fees, and the largest part is getting retained to make more money in the future. So now that we've talked a little bit about index funds, what are target date funds? So I feel like this comes up a lot when people are doing allocations for their retirement planning, whether it's 401k, 403b, that they'll say like, how old are you versus how old when you want to retire, a target date fund or a target age fund. Can you unpack that a little for us and tell us what those are and what we should know about them?
Mm-hmm. Target date funds, I think, are another good option for when you're choosing what you actually want to be invested in, what stocks and bonds do you want to buy. A target date fund is a collection of stocks and bonds, maybe some cash or a couple other investments in there, but mostly stocks and bonds, and it automatically reallocates for you with time. So you can say, hey, I am 30 years old and it's 2024 and I plan to retire when I'm 60 in 30 years, which is 20 in 30 years. What is it? So it's 2054. I want to retire
Yes,
in 30
that's correct.
years.
Yep.
So you can choose the 2054 target date fund. And so every year as it gets closer between 2024 and 2054, it will adjust what you're invested in automatically for you. You don't have to do anything. So when you're younger, when you're first starting out, when you're farther away from retirement, it will have you in a higher percentage of stocks. You might be 90% stocks, 10% bonds. And as you get closer to retirement, it's going to automatically reallocate. So when you get to 2054, you might be 70% stocks and 30% bonds. Because as you know, in general, when we think about investing in this allocation, as you get closer to retirement, you still will need stocks in your portfolio. Even when you are retired, you'll still need those stocks because that's what's going to make more money and help your money grow. But you're going to be retired and you're not going to be earning any more money. You're going to be less risky. You want to be a little more protective of your money, and that's where bonds will help smooth that ride. They're more stable. They're not going to go up and down and fluctuate as much as a stock. So that's why usually as you get closer to retirement, you'll have more bonds in your portfolio because you can't afford as much risk. You can't afford your portfolio dropping by 50% because you need that money to live off of now. So a target date fund will automatically do those allocations for you. You could do it on your own. Like let's say you had a stock market index fund and a bond market index fund. That's called a 2-fund portfolio. And every year you could on your own kind of make sure, hey, I want to be 90%, 10%. I want to be 85, 15. You could do it yourself. The target date fund automatically does it for you, which makes it very simple. The one difference, that to think about, a target date fund is usually has expense ratios that might be slightly higher than you choosing your own index funds. Let's say it's going to be a little higher, but it's not exorbitantly high. And for a lot of people, like, hey, it's set it and forget it. You're automatically reallocating for me. It's definitely worth a slightly higher expense ratio. It's worth it for me. And the other thing that you can do, like, let's say you picked that 2054 target date fund. Well, number one, you don't have to retire in 2050. Let's say you wanted to keep working, you could still keep that fund. It's not going to expire or something on you.
It doesn't explode at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. The time is up. Another thing to think about is you can look at it, and this fund will tell you, over time, what are your allocations? What's your percentage of stocks versus bonds? And you could say, and especially for women who tend to live longer than men, to say, hey, you know what? That is a little too conservative for me. I don't want you to get into so many bonds so early. So let's say, yes, I'm definitely planning on retiring in 2054, or hey, maybe I'll retire in 2052, a couple years early. But I'm going to pick a target date fund that's 2064, that's 2058. You can pick a target date fund that's for several years after you actually retire, because that all that means is that it's going to get into more bonds later on. You're going to be you're going to have more stocks along the way before it starts switching over.
Dreading one more shift, one more day, seeing one more patient? What if that dread isn't simply anxiety and fear, but rather the bubbling up of underlying resentment that you are underpaid, disrespected, marginalized, overwhelmed, and your schedule, quite frankly, sucks? I'm a clinician negotiation coach, and I help providers like you to land the biggest raises of their career. It's super simple. Here's how it works. You book your 1-hour call in which we discuss your current compensation, what your specific goals are, and create a personalized plan. You'll hang out with a strategic plan for how to land a bigger paycheck, a better schedule, and blocked admin time. Life is too short to constantly feel that resentment, to be insulted by your pay, and to continue to have that crappy schedule. A negotiation consultation will help you to understand your value, feel confident about the conversations you need to have, and have the gumption to finally earn what you are worth. I have dedicated slots on my calendar for negotiation calls each week. Would you like one of those calls to be yours? The link in the show notes is the fastest way to get that booked. And the way that I see a lot of these things, like when you mentioned that the expense ratio of these target date funds is going to be probably a little higher than an index fund, or probably a little higher than something else, is that in like a lot of things in life, when we pay a little bit more, we have to do less of the work ourselves and we have to spend less time and energy worrying about this. So if you're someone who wants to do this on your own, who wants to do, more bonds slowly over time as you get closer to retirement, great. But if you're someone who is like, I want to set this, I want to be aware of it and know what's going on, but not be the primary person who's turning the dial. So I see this as like the dial where when you're earlier on in your career, when you're early on in your investing, you want to be on the more aggressive side in terms of the way that your portfolio is outlined. But as you're getting closer and closer to retirement, as you said, when we're going to take the money out next year or in 5 or 10 years, as opposed to in 50 years, we want to be more conservative with it, which means we accept some lesser degree of growth for the reassurance that it's going to be there when we need it. So as we get closer to wanting the money, we turn down the aggression. As we get older, we turn down the aggression in terms of investment portfolio. So is there anything else you want to say about index funds versus target date funds and sort of choosing what we want to be invested in? I feel like VTSAX has its own, like people who are invested in VTSAX, like they think that's like the single best thing to be invested in. People love that. I do think it's a reasonable choice for a lot of people. Anything else to add on that, Sarah?
I think those are the biggest things. And like you said, yeah, I like that how you describe turning that dial of more stocks, more bonds. How are you adjusting that? That's a good way to look at it. And like we said before, people love VTSX, which is great in of itself. But what is your account? Like, where is your brokerage firm? What are your choices in there? You don't have to have VTSX, or else, it's there. You have more options. Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, you're going to make the best choices that you can with your knowledge and your available choices. And as long as you're consistently investing over time, you're headed in the right direction. So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of you're putting money away. Is that something that, you lump sum, you put in at the end of the year versus something called dollar cost averaging or sort of buying as you go? What are the differences between those two things? If people hear those terms, what do they mean? And, what is the best, quote unquote, the best way to go about this?
So dollar cost averaging means you put in usually the same amount of money, $100 a week, $1,000 a month, $500 a paycheck, whatever you're doing. You put in the same amount of money at the same intervals. Every 2 weeks, every month, you're putting the same amount of money. So, and it's called dollar cost averaging because some months, the stock market is up. And so, which is great for what you're already invested in, but that just means when you buy more stocks, they're more expensive, because the prices have gone up. So you're buying less stocks because it costs more with that same $100. But maybe next month, hey, the stock market's going down. Maybe we get in a bit of a recession. So now we like to say, hey, stocks are on sale. You can buy a lot more stocks for that same $100 than you could last month. But you're not choosing it. You're not trying to time the market. You're putting in the same amount, every 2 weeks, and you're buying whatever you can with whatever the stock prices are at that time. You don't care what the stock prices are. You're always putting in the same amount of money. So that's dollar cost averaging. And a benefit to that is you're not trying to time the market of saying, ooh, is the stock market down? Is it going to go back up? Should I buy more today? Should I wait a little bit until prices might get? No, you're just always the same amount at the same time. A lump sum is you put in, whatever you planned on investing for the year. Like, let's say you wanted to max out your IRA, which is $7,000 for 2024. And instead of dollar cost averaging, dividing that $7,000 by 52 weeks of the year or 12 months of the year, you say, hey, I want to invest $7,000 all at once. And you'll do it on January 1st or December 25th or, whatever. You just pick one day and do it all on the one day and then be done. That's a lump sum investment.
Yeah. I think the bottom line here is that you need to be investing regularly, ideally consistently, right? So like consistently, every week, every month, every year, however it is that you are doing it consistently. And also, can you make it something that you don't have to remember, right? So we've talked previously about Roth versus traditional and this like Roth rollover and a backdoor Roth and all of these things that can sort of feel overwhelming in terms of the logistics about putting it in and rolling it over. Mostly that's not true. So for these things that you're investing either inside or outside of a retirement vessel, you just want to set it. And I sort of tentatively say set it and forget it because I don't actually want you to forget about it, but set it and then not worry about it. So maybe like set it and then decide you're going to check in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Like maybe you do it quarterly throughout the year. Maybe you do it every 6 months where you're looking and you're making sure it looks right, right? These are the things that I want to be invested in, that it's consistently withdrawing from my paycheck, that it's being withheld, that however that money is getting in there, it's going to do it consistently. That is more important than getting sort of lost in the weeds of the best way to make the most money is to do it this way. Like the best way to make the most money is to invest early and often and keep going over time is the best way to become wealthy. It's not, there is no secret system. There's certainly tips that make it more profitable and tips that make it easier in terms of lifestyle. But ultimately, no one gets this right unless they do it, unless they start putting money in, unless they're consistently investing.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing. You have to be consistent and you have to actually do it. There have been studies done to compare lump sum investing versus dollar cost averaging. And the studies show that there's ever so slightly a benefit to a lump sum investment in the beginning of the year versus at the end of the year versus doing dollar cost averaging throughout the year. Ever so slightly a benefit to lump sum. But in the end, is it really going to be a benefit to you if you forget to invest the money? If you forget to have it set aside so you don't actually have that lump sum to invest, where yes, the best thing, like you said, Tracy, is whatever you are going to actually consistently do. That's the best way to do it. And for most people, we are always dollar cost averaging in our 401k, 403b, because if you set aside this dollar amount, this percent every paycheck, that's dollar cost averaging. You're always doing that every paycheck. So you're always dollar cost averaging that. So most of us do that anyway. And so whatever makes you the most consistent to regularly be putting money in is the best way.
Amen. All right. So let's talk about some resources. So if someone is listening and they're like, I want a very straightforward plan of how to get from where I am to wealthy or wealthier or being able to build wealth. What are some resources that we can offer them as we wrap up here? Some things that they can go and read or listen to that could be helpful.
I mentioned Choose FI before. They have a lot of resources on their website. They have a free class that you can go through all about kind of basic investing and things like that. They also have a podcast if you want to listen to podcast episodes. I think they're 600 episodes deep. So the earlier ones are more about investing in index funds and these types of things. So they're always a good resource I recommend. And I think specifically when we talk about investing and index funds, stocks versus bonds, A Simple Path to Wealth is what you need. That's a book by an author called J.L. Collins. He also has a website, J.L. Collins NH for New Hampshire, because he lives in New Hampshire. And there's apparently another J.L. Collins in the world. But jlcollinsnh.com, I think, is his website. And he started a website of just literally all about about index fund investing and what, in his life, in his research and in his work of figuring out what is the best way and the most effective way to invest my money to make the most money. And he found index funds is it. And it turns out that it's also an extremely simple way to invest, but it's also very effective. So he started his website by basically kind of writing these blog posts, these little letters to his daughter when she was young of saying, hey, when my daughter grows up, I want her to read this. And this is what I recommend for my daughter. And then he turned it into a book of saying, hey, I recommend it not only to my daughter, but to anyone and everyone. So his book is a fantastic resource to learn all the basics of this.
Yeah, I on your recommendation, Sarah, I actually read it or listened to the audiobook and I felt like it's so clear. He breaks down super clearly what index funds are, how they work, what the studies are in terms of why they're a good choice for, I mean, as he says, literally everyone at any stage of their, wealth journey and of building wealth. And I also felt like, unlike some of the other, I feel like I want to say like salespeople who are like selling like things, that he was just like, here is information. Like it was just this very simple system that was just explained as like, here is how you do this. It's not confusing. It's not hard. It's not only for rich people. It's not only for special people. It is for everyone. And here is, with a very low barrier to entry, how you can do some of these steps and implement them in your life. And I felt like that was very refreshing in a world where financial advice can seem a little convoluted or like it's only for some people, that this was very clear and also very like everyone is welcome to do these things, and they're relatively easy to implement once you can get the behaviors down to do these things and to build wealth over time. So we'll link his website and that book in the show notes so people can go and check that out. I feel like that's like a good place to wrap up in terms of this stage of investing. And we will be back with other episodes on retirement and savings goals in the future. So if you're not already subscribed, stick around. And Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to next time.
Finances can be one of these topics that is just fraught with potential emotions, and that sometimes we don't feel that comfortable talking about money to the people in our lives. So I hope that this series of episodes serves as a guidepost for you and that you learn something to take back to your own management of your personal finances that puts you just 1% more in the direction of your money goals. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.